So we're going to chat a little bit more about the Mark Forkner indictment. So both Alan and I had a chance to read through the actual criminal complaint. And Alan, let's start with you. So what new information did you learn reading through this? Which this is the first criminal complaint I've ever read. I've read through different lawsuits over the years, and obviously they look similar in form. But this was interesting just to read through this.
Yeah, obviously it wants to highlight the quote-unquote criminal charges that they're going to allege, and so it's basically wire fraud. They're trying to convict him of wire fraud involving aircraft parts. Now, as a flight test pilot, you don't sell parts, and so the connection they make is that, well, the pilots all knew that if Boeing sold airplanes, that Boeing is going to make money. So therefore, there's a financial interest. Like that's a stretch. Okay, Boeing's what, 100,000 employee company, 250,000 employee company. I mean, it's a huge corporation. Selling some airplanes does not going to increase the take home pay for a flight test pilot. I've never seen that. I doubt that that's a thing. So it isn't like there's a real financial incentive besides selling, Boeing in general, selling some airplanes, okay. But the pieces I pulled out of it were sort of the flow of how the thing broke down in terms of the Forkner was in a simulator. They're doing run-throughs on the simulator, and the simulator started to act funky. The flight test engineer said they're having issues. Okay, awesome. He questioned it. They thought it was MCAS. He reached out to somebody who had been involved in MCAS, and MCAS's guys are saying, yeah, it now operates at high speed and at low speed. Okay. Should that have been conveyed to the FAA? Maybe. I don't know.
Well, the answer in the complaint is yes. So if you grant them that the answer is yes, then that's where this becomes a little more clear.
So, okay. But there's not one person designing this airplane. I mean, there's hundreds of people designing this airplane. And that same information that maybe the flight test pilot knew, the safety people knew. They must have. The people that designed the system must have known. And that makes me wonder if a flight test pilot, FAA flight test pilot, was in the airplane at all, came across that system, maybe activated because of the flight test regimes they were going through. It levies all these things and accuses all these things on one person. There's not one person involved in this. One person didn't have that much control over the design of the system. Maybe if you had told the aircraft evaluation group that it was the MCAS system was working at low speeds, would the aircraft evaluation group would have had a different response on training? That's a maybe. That's a guess. I think that's still a guess. They may have. They may come back and say, yeah, we want to do more training because of the low speed aspects. Awesome. I think that fine. And I think AG hasn't been explicit in saying that. So there's just a couple missing links here. As if you're going to accuse them of essentially causing crashes, the two crashes that have been involved have nothing to do with low speed operation of the system. They're just a couple of different aspects that don't click with me on one person being the linchpin to aircraft problems.
The way I read it, and I think it's laid out in a pretty cohesive way, but they basically said it seems like he was the point man. Like he was the one who had to tell the FAA and testify, if that's the word, maybe it's not, to them about what should be or should not be. And that's why the other people that were involved in the project aren't really relevant, because they weren't the ones the FAA was asking the questions to. They weren't the one who was instructed to tell the FAA what was going on about these different things.
That wouldn't be the case in any kind of certification that I've been involved with. The certifications that I'm involved with, each of the individual disciplines, and flight test is a discipline. So from flight test to electrical to mechanical to flight controls, all those different elements, they only focus on one, flight test. The people that did the system safety assessment, who I think knew this was going on, told the FAA. I would assume they would have told their counterparts about it or talked about it. Are we making the case that the FAA knew nothing about the system at all in any aspect ever? I just find that hard to believe.
Well, I think it's just narrow. I mean, I think the point is, which they outline, I think, pretty clearly, which is, when he was testifying to the FAA or just talking to them, whatever term, I don't know the right term, did he withhold information that he knew had changed that should have been in the manual? And it seems pretty clear, like abundantly clear through the criminal complaint, that he did, because they say on this date, here's some correspondence via email, via text that shows he knew this, and then here's another date later where he went in front of the FAA and did not disclose that information, which he should have disclosed. They're not claiming that he caused the crashes. They're just saying, here is the fraud, which is he had information, he withheld it. He had information on this date, he withheld it on this date. He had numerous opportunities to come clean, essentially, with what should have been in the manual about the MCAS, and he just didn't. So that, to me, is what I pull out of it. I don't know that all the other things about others involved in the program are material or not. Because it doesn't seem like they were asked. They weren't in that position where should this be in it or not? And even if it was, that's separate from what he did.
I don't think they are separate. This is why I say there's multiple aspects to any large aircraft mod. Even small aircraft mods have multiple inputs as to what should happen and how it all should integrate together. So let's just play this out for a second. So the safety people said, and I could be wrong, but I think what the safety people said is that if the system misbehaved, the response is to turn off the horizontal stab. Okay, awesome. So if the safety person is telling the flight test pilots, which I'm sure they did, that the way to address this particular issue is to shut off the horizontal stab actuation system, then I don't know if I'm super worried about that as a flight test pilot. Like, it's the same as if the horizontal stab started to run away at any particular time. I think it had, although the system, I think there's a question about how many times the system should have operated. The people who designed it knew that, and the people who safety assessed it knew that too. Did the flight test pilot know all that detail? I don't know. I doubt it. Let's unwind this one more step. If the flight test pilot knew that the system would react multiple times to force a nose down, he had really a difficult time to get it back. Do you think that they're telling the FAA that the system's fine, or are they going back to the design guys or design team and saying this doesn't work the way it should, and we're not gonna bless it, certify it? You see how it's like a tangled web, and they're trying to pick out one string out of this tangled web and say, well, this is the piece that hold it all together. If this flight test pilot didn't convey this information to this specific group, then the whole thing is a disaster. I think there's multiple opportunities on multiple levels for people to say something about it, and it either didn't come through or didn't get addressed.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that changes. Just like if you're to go sit before Congress and testify and give 99 true statements and give one false one and lie in one line about one fact to Congress, you still lied to Congress. And I think that's what they're highlighting here, is that he had opportunities to explain that the MCAS was now different, that he knew was now different than he had originally told them. He said, leave this out of the manual. This isn't going to be relevant because of X, Y, and Z. And then when those facts change, they're clear that he knew, he went back and didn't tell them. And then, so I don't know that the other aspects of it are significant, but what is significant is they said they know that this was, and known by him, a significant financial interest, because if he had explained that this stuff the MCAS should be back in the pilot manual, that was going to bump it up above a level B certification, which was going to cost Boeing millions and millions of dollars that they were going to have to give back to their customers, because their contracts were written that it was only a level B where the pilots didn't have to do more training than what was there. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because like you said, there's a lot of veins to this.
Look, just to be clear about this, you shouldn't. There's no need to lie to the FAA, right? There's no situation where that makes any sense at all. Because if you know the aircraft is designed properly, tell them. You can just tell them how it works. It should be a no-brainer for the FAA to buy into your solution. I think that is clear. Don't mess around there. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of missing pieces here of other engineers on the staff saying that the system was safe. There's not just one person. The flight test person is a very important link in all this, but it isn't like they're alone in making the assessment necessarily. That's the part I think that the prosecution is going to have to try to weed through, because the defense is going to highlight that like crazy. Like, there's not one person designing the airplane, and everybody on the Boeing side thought it was safe to go fly.
I'm just not sure if that's the question that they're asking. Is he I don't think the burden of proof is whether he thought it was safe, because he probably did. And even without the MCIS being the new version of it or whatever, he probably would have said, yeah, it's safe. But that wasn't the question. The question was, why didn't you tell us this when it changed? It seems like the answer is because it would have cost Boeing millions of dollars and put you in hot water with Boeing, because this was supposed to be a level B training requirement. That seems like the narrow focus of the investigation.
It is, and I think it's an assumption they're going to have to try to make the case. I think it's going to be a lot harder once you get in that courtroom than what it seems on paper.